Welcome to Joyous, and welcome to the webinar. I am Mike Carden, one of the co-founders of Joyous, and I'm going to be talking today a little bit about how you build an inclusive culture using feedback. So just a little bit about Joyous. Look, our purpose in life at Joyous is to make life better for working people, and that might sound like a strange place to start, for a company that's involved in feedback. But we really do firmly believe that what we're trying to achieve, is to work with organisations to help make the lives of working people better. And if you work in the world of HR, I guess that there is probably not a more noble cause than trying to make the life better of working people. And so we're focused on the area of feedback, and what does that mean from the perspective of how feedback relates to working people. Well, what we try and do is we help give everyone a voice, and we want people to feel comfortable giving and receiving feedback, and we want that feedback to spark action. And so that is a very kind of different approach to the world of feedback, which is traditionally, I guess, been one of measurement. We're actually much more about saying, hey, if you want to build a feedback culture, you want to build an inclusive culture where everyone's voices are heard, well, you need to make people feel comfortable giving and receiving feedback. And that should really be the basis of how you approach any kind of program like this. So what does that actually mean? From our perspective, one of the biggest things that means is that we're very much about this idea of conversational feedback. That actually you don't want to be doing surveys, you want to be driving conversations. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But as soon as you're trying to drive a conversation with someone, well, what you very quickly find is that conversations really only work if they're open and they're two-way. And so Joyous has been built around this idea of open weekly conversations and driving those conversations. So taking the sort of information that you might otherwise get, asked for in a kind of annual survey or something, but instead turning it into small weekly interactions which are delivered to people's mobile devices or delivered to their desktop, and using those to stimulate conversation, and then collecting all of the information that comes from that conversation, and then using our computer intelligence and other tools to take that information and provide you the sort of insights you might otherwise have got from doing an annual survey or something. And we're very, very strong believers in this idea of open feedback, that you're really trying to build an environment where people feel comfortable giving feedback. And certainly the idea of an anonymous survey in that space, as soon as you establish that idea, well, every time you run an anonymous survey, unfortunately you send a message to the team which says, well, providing feedback is somehow unsafe, which of course is the opposite of what you're trying to do. You're trying to provide an environment where people feel safe giving feedback. And so that's where we've been putting our endeavours for a number of years. And I often get asked, well, since you now have this quite unstructured sort of way of gathering feedback on a weekly basis, how does that work? Well, actually, it's far from unstructured. In fact, what we do is we have a number of models that can kind of sit behind the feedback that you're trying to gather, so that the topics which are important to the business get covered. And that informs the questions that get asked and the conversation starters that get sent out. And so what I'm just sharing here on the screen at the moment is just one of those kind of models. And this is a fairly traditional model of some elements of employee experience there, being culture and environment, workplace well-being, fairness and inclusion, and ultimately some measures of engagement. And the reason I'm just showing this chart is to show that we've actually built this stuff in a way that's quite straightforward to understand, that there's these big realms, which are big topics, and underneath those realms, there's some sub-realms which make those up. And then what we do is that we deliver questions and conversation starters based on those realms in some kind of a rotation, so that you get this kind of balanced insight spread throughout the year. Now, one of the things that we've spent a lot of time on is actually this idea of inclusion, when inclusion is thought about from the perspective of feedback. And so one of those elements of inclusion is making sure that everyone is included in the conversation, and that it's easy to access on your mobile device, it's easy to access if you're working on a shop floor or in an office or you're out on the road. But also a big part of it too is just thinking about things like language even. So we target a low reading age on our questions, as a for instance, not because we assume that all staff have a low reading age, but actually because it's just more inclusive. That it's more inclusive for people who have English as a second language. It allows a lot of people to process stuff much more quickly. So a lot of thought has gone in with Joyous into these elements of how you actually make a product that works for everyone inclusively. So like I said, you have this kind of question cycle, and we ask questions on different realms. And of course, I mentioned that we're absolutely about being an open feedback company. And when we I guess originally came up with this idea of like, how do we create open feedback? How do we break that kind of feedback is only provided in secret kind of idea? One of the things we learned is you actually have to change the conversations that you have. So the traditional idea of very instrumentation or measurement-driven systems and feedback is that they're about leadership. You ask these questions about someone's leader and so on, and of course they're very ego-bruising. They're an opportunity to kind of I guess feed the trolls, so to speak. And so what we've really focused on is this idea that things are about the personal experiences of employees rather than about leadership. Now, of course, leadership frames people's experience of work, so that does definitely inform you, and it's constructive, but it's designed to be constructive as well as kind of comfortable and topics you can have a conversation around. So just to I guess underline that there's not just a matter of taking an anonymous survey and making it open. It's about really shifting the way that you think about this whole conversation. So going to talk just now a little bit about how this works for people, and I'm going to show you a demonstration. And so the way this works is that we initiate a question, typically weekly, sometimes more frequently than that. Certainly during the pandemic, we've had a lot of our customers send out questions even daily. But typically, weekly we'll send out an email or an SMS or some other way of getting to an employee. And within that email, there'll be a question. Now, this situation here is a simple rating question. It's you're asking about concentration at work, and by clicking on one of those buttons, one of those ratings there, and this is a rating question. That element of choosing a score does a few things. The first one is, well, it's choosing a score, but the second thing it does is it actually loads a web app onto someone's phone or onto their desktop. So there's no sort of rollout, getting people to download things or anything like that. This stuff just happens by, people get sent an email and they click it. And then the other part of that is that all of their security credentials and logins and so on are kind of contained within that click. So that for most people, there's just it's just completely simple. It's absolutely, there's nothing to download, there's no setup, there's no login, but more importantly, and we'll see this in a second, it just feels like you're having a conversation via SMS or iMessage or something. So there's no paradigm to learn of how this kind of feedback mechanism is going to work. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into the actual Joyous tool to give you a look at that. And so what I am going to do here, just give me a second. I was all beautifully set up to do this demo before I had that technical issue earlier, so just bear with me for a second here. But what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at what this looks like for someone who is on their phone or on their desktop, right? So I'm starting off as an employee, and I've received this question. This question here says, I'm proud of the work they do, and I've said, hey, that's a 9. I've clicked on that button, and you can see there that was just a simple kind of. I'll just go back and do that again. It was a simple kind of questionnaire. By interacting with it, I've kind of started a conversation, right? So I've said, well, my reply is a 9 to this, and it says, what are you most proud of in your work? And maybe I could say, I was really proud of how we all move to work from home. Now, you can see there that was just like typing a message on my phone. It's been sent, and now I'll show you where that feedback's gone. And this is the sort of pure magic of an approach like Joyous, because what's happened with that feedback is that this now here that we're looking at is a live feed of all of my team, right? Now, anyone that's in my hierarchical tree effectively is their feedback is appearing in my live feed here, and it's I'll give you the caveat to start with that this what we're looking at here is generated by our demo robot. So it's a little bit kind of nonsensical at times, but you get the idea. Lots of feedback is arriving. And if we look over here at Ralph Colombo, that was the person I was just providing feedback. You can see here I'm proud of the work that I do. I said it was a 9. I was really proud of how we moved to work from home. And the nature of this live feed, and by the way, this live feed works on your phone, this works wherever you are. But if I'm on my desktop and I say, well, maybe I want to respond to that, I will just say, you should be proud. Thanks for your efforts. I can actually interact with feedback, which is a completely different thing. Right? I can interact with feedback, and we can see here that feedback's sent, and guess what? That feedback has gone back to the employee in this instance. And by the way, I'm Alison Smith in this demo, so I'm variously Ralph, the employee, and Alison, the people leader. So you can see that I can just interact with feedback. I can interact in the simplest possible way. I mean, I might actually just provide a reaction to this. It's very, very simple to interact with feedback. But that's a very, very key part of what makes Joyous different. By creating these kind of open conversations, you actually encourage feedback, and you actually can respond to feedback and so on. And so in this instance, we've just responded with a thank you, which is an opportunity to provide some, to provide some recognition. But I might want to ask more detail. Is there anyone specifically? So is there anyone specifically we should give a shout out to? You can see that you can use this kind of approach also to interact in different ways, find more information and so on. So very, very different than the traditional approach to feedback. We kind of are driving this idea that you're actually able to create interactions and small interactions and so on. Now, on top of that, the question that then comes is, well, am I going to get overwhelmed with this feedback? I've got lots of feedback. How does this feedback, where is the visibility? Well, the cool thing that we do is that if you're just managing a team of 6 or 7 people, you'll see your feedback here as a leader or manager. But if you're further up the hierarchy, you can see all of the feedback that sits underneath your tree of feedback. Or if you're sitting in human resources, you can have visibility to a whole lot of feedback. And the thing which is like super cool here, the bit which like just changes the nature of everything, is you can filter that feedback in lots of different ways. And so I might just say, okay, well, I'm going to look at feedback that is from people in Wellington. So I'm just receiving feedback here from people in Wellington. And by the way, it says there's photos here. I sort of forgot to mention this, because it's just a conversational device, like like using your phone, like using WhatsApp or iMessage. If you want to take a photo of something, you just can. And we see that all the time. We see feedback which is full of photos of things. We've got a construction client, and when they ask the question about what people are proud of, people will take photos of smooth concrete floors. And so, as someone further up the organization, suddenly I have a link to people which I wouldn't otherwise have. But there we go. We said we're interested in people in Wellington. Maybe we're interested in the sales division and the marketing division. So we're looking at people who are in the sales and marketing division in Wellington. Maybe that's because we're going to visit those people tomorrow. But we might also be kind of specifically interested in I don't know. Let's say we're only interested in the topic of well-being. We can just look at information which relates to well-being, and look, we're interested in people who have negative sentiment in well-being. And so I'm now seeing verbatims which relate to an idea I'm interested in, which is people in sales and marketing in Wellington, who have negative sentiment towards well-being. So you can see the very, very kind of powerful nature of these kind of flexible filters. And I'll just delete my way through the filters to show you some other ways you can use them. So another way you might do it is you might go, well, actually, I'm going to have a meeting with Ralph tomorrow to talk about, our one-on-one. And so, look, I can see all of the feedback that Ralph has provided. Moreover, if I had someone who has a team, I don't know, I might want to look at all the feedback from Adele Butcher's team. Lots and lots of different ways that you can kind of cut the feedback in ways that are kind of useful. That is the idea of live feed, and honestly, within many of our organisations, we see lots and lots of activity happen at this kind of live feed level. In fact, it's fascinating to me. We've got a really great example of how this kind of micro feedback works at one of our large clients right at the moment. And going into the pandemic, they asked questions which related quite specifically to challenges related to moving people to work from home or essential workers. And one of the pieces of feedback someone got was that I don't have a chair at home. And you know what? Like the people leader was able to actually action that, was able to in fact, I believe they just went into the office because they lived nearby and dropped the chair off. But it's the sort of thing that you can only do when you have this kind of open micro feedback environment. So that is, I guess, the live feed part of it. But also I mentioned that we go and extract insights out of this stuff as well. And we extract those insights at all sorts of different levels, but I'll just show you firstly what that looks like for a people leader. So if I'm at the top of the organization, or I'm in HR or something, I can see these scores which relate to the entire organization. And I mentioned before in the kind of preamble that we were looking today at a model where we had culture and environment, fairness and inclusion, well-being and engagement. So you can see kind of a score for each of those in the organization. And we can see here, so if I'm looking at culture and environment, it's a sort of 7.8. It's on a spectrum of a culture that limits people to a culture that empowers them. Well, we're moving to the right, but we're still kind of in the middle. And you can see a lot of people are kind of neutral about it, right? And likewise, I can see the different things in the different realms. So designed in a way that's very easy for anyone to understand. And part of the reason we've designed it so it's easy for anyone to understand is this is not just an HR tool, that these results are distributed down to individual line managers in a live fashion. So I can see what's happening in my team, even if my team's only 6 people, or maybe I've got 30 people because I'm in middle management or so on, or I'm a divisional manager with 500 people, or I'm a CEO with 6,000 people. I can see the scores for my part of the organisation, and you can drill into this too, right? So we're talking about culture and environment. Well, I can break that down into the physical environment, people's responsibility, clarity. I can see how the different elements of that are moving, right? And again, designed so this makes sense for everyone. And even I can go into the history of it. I can see what questions have been asked over time. In fact, if I look here, I can see that understanding how my work contributes to our success, which is a measure of clarity. Well, it's most people don't think that. But the cool thing is that if you look over here, you've got this blue speech bubble, and whenever you see that, well, that means you can actually go back and look at the verbatims which relate to that particular piece of that particular data point. So I can see all the commentary that went on at that point, right? And so if I go back to the insights there, we can see drill down for different things. Of course, the filters still work here too, right? So what were we looking at before? We were looking at Wellington. I can see what's happening in Wellington. I think we're looking at sales and marketing in Wellington, right? So now I'm looking at sales and marketing in Wellington. Quite specifically looking at one part of the business. And in fact, what we were doing, we were just wanting to focus on well-being. I'm just looking at well-being and sales and marketing in Wellington. So very easy to kind of chop the data up in any way you want, right? Absolutely any way you want. Hey, now I'll just pause at this moment because I think that we had a bit of a rough start to the webinar, and I didn't get around to telling people that if you want to ask questions, feel free just to jump into the question bar there, and we'll answer those questions. I've strolled my way through all the not seeing your screen questions now. So if you have any questions, feel free to kind of fire them my way. Okay, so if we just continue on there, we were looking there at the information kind of in summary, right? How information is delivered in summary. But also, if you want to compare parts of the organisation, we have the ability to kind of to do heat maps, right? And so when you look at heat maps, what I'm doing now is I'm doing a comparison across different pieces of the organization. In this particular instance, I'm just looking at my direct reports and kind of comparing them. But what we were talking about before, we were talking about different divisions, weren't we? So I can kind of bring up how different divisions are looking. I can kind of drill into a section. So well, let's see what's happening in culture and environment. I can see the different scores here, and maybe I want to filter that. Maybe I just want to look at culture and environment for I don't know. Let's just look at the Auckland location. I just want to look at culture and environment for Auckland. Gosh, culture and environment for Auckland was much better than elsewhere. So I can see that. By the way, again, if I want to kind of look at this line here where we seem to be doing kind of worse across all divisions about clarity, I can click on that and it will take me back to now the verbatims which relate to that data point for Auckland, related to clarity. So super straightforward to do that. In fact, it's like it's even beyond that. Like I can actually use this to create kind of little report of my own. So maybe I wanted to compare sales with marketing. Now I'm just comparing sales and marketing. I want to do that for Wellington, and I want to just look at engagement. So now I've kind of created a kind of mini report of my own to kind of compare different parts of the organization. That is the kind of, I guess, the summary of how the tool works. I'm very conscious that I'm running much shorter of time than I would normally be due to the unfortunately delayed start. So what I will do now is I'll kind of jump back into my presentation. So just to kind of close some of this off, right? And hopefully that's given you all a good understanding of kind of what we're trying to achieve with a tool which is just like using WhatsApp. So it's very straightforward for people to use. By the way, one of the things I didn't show you, and I should have, is that if I am looking at this stuff conversationally, if I am looking at this on my phone, I can just scroll back up through this, like I would any conversation, and see everything that has been said and so on, right? So it is just the paradigm is very, very much a straightforward paradigm to understand if you're a user. Now the leader feed, I guess, is the bit which is very, very unusual from a feedback perspective, but we really know that the product lives and dies in this area too, right? That we do a lot of stuff to encourage leaders to interact with their feedback. We know that it's very efficient, that all of our focus groups and other stuff shows us that the return on effort is very, very high for leaders. They can spend often a few seconds or a few minutes and reply to some feedback, and that is absolutely makes a massive difference. And of course, we have ways of extracting information out of there. And certainly, I haven't got time to show you today, but because we generate so much feedback in the system versus a lot of approaches, we have a rich mine of data to work with, particularly conversational data, which we can extract themes out of and so on and so forth to give you a really deep understanding of the actual critical things which are happening in your business. Hopefully I've got across the idea of this paradigm, right? This absolute shift in a paradigm where you're going saying that, that the old idea of kind of anonymous surveys done infrequently really reinforces this idea that feedback is somehow unsafe. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get over that and drive to a new environment where people feel comfortable giving open feedback, and that becomes a much more inclusive environment. And I guess the perception that we sometimes come across here is that people might feel nervous sharing their honest feedback for what leaders might think of them. But the reality of it is that we're very good at educating people on sharing constructive feedback, and that should be a function that we work with our clients on doing. And then leaders, if leaders value their feedback, they respect them for it too, it very quickly creates this environment, which we have many case studies for now that just shows that you actually can create a much more transparent and inclusive environment. And by the way, that transparency is a really important thing too, right? That the idea of having an environment where I guess appreciation flows around freely and issues that need addressing surface very quickly is kind of part of the new paradigm of work. So I guess to kind of summarize, we look at that kind of idea of doing feedback in secret, and it's The problem is that you can't help an individual. You can't ask for more information, and it can facilitate a toxic environment. Whereas if you make it open, you can actually help individuals. You can create dialogue. You can kind of be constructive. So there is still some situations where there is information which people want to keep confidential and so on. But maybe the feedback platform is not the best place for that anyway. Or otherwise, we do have ways of dealing with that ourselves too. So I want to thank everyone for your time today. Sorry for the rough start. It really wasn't quite the way that we expected it to run. But hopefully everyone has learned something. If there's any more information that you want, please feel free to reach out. We'll send out contact details to all attendees immediately after this. I do have a couple of questions here. So one of them is just very simply, is it possible to receive a copy of this recording? And absolutely, we will provide a copy of this recording. I think we might try and chop off the very beginning of it. And then there was a question about if staff give their names, how to provide them comfort in giving honest feedback. And I really want to say that this is central to what we do. And I think it's a good question to end on. Is that we've done a lot of work in this area. The very first and most important part of it is you've got to be very careful in how you frame what kind of feedback you seek. So I mentioned before that we're very, very big on the idea of allowing of creating kind of conversation starters that stimulate feedback that's non-ego bruising. So really focus on the outcomes rather than the leadership behaviours. So a good example of that, to make that kind of real, is if you think about leadership behaviours. One of the great leadership behaviours is that people have clear objectives, right? They understand how their role contributes to the organisation. They understand what they should be doing. Now, if you ask questions about clarity that are framed in such a way as they are, from an employee's experience of the organisation, then those questions actually are easy to answer in a non-ego bruising fashion, but also they light the path for leaders. So if leaders receive feedback and it says that, hey, people don't think that their objectives are clear enough, it's very, very simple to kind of apply to that and make a difference to that. That's kind of one part of it. The second part of it too, though, is we provide a lot of resources for our organisations, and managers and leaders in our organisations to help them respond to feedback. We even have parts of the tool which actually really address that automatically, and so that's really helping people understand when they should take a conversation offline. How they should deal with tricky situations and so on and so forth. So a large number of elements of that. Thank you again, everyone, for attending. I will make sure that we send out a recording of this. And again, apologies for the technical issues at the beginning. It's funny, we've gone so long now with this environment of work from home and et cetera, et cetera. And as soon as I get back into the office, I start having technical problems. Who would have thought? Okay, thank you very much for your time, everyone. Bye-bye.